Hello, this week we are going to be talking about planning and research. And this is a big part of what you do as a student, and hopefully you'll do a lot of research and planning in different areas of your life as you go along. So here are our learning objectives. We're mostly focusing on invention or pre-writing and looking at developing effective written communication strategies through research and planning, and also looking at how to incorporate technology, specifically the Learn Library. And we're going to be looking at how to effectively evaluate sources when researching. So last week we discussed the characteristics of academic writing. Now I want you to think about what academic readers, your instructor, other students, researchers, professionals, etc., what do these academic readers need and want from you? And here's a quote that I really like. Source citations demonstrate that while you may not yet be a recognized expert on the topic, you've nevertheless done your homework and you are part of the conversation surrounding it. You include sources that you find credible and that provide evidence and good reasons to back up your claims, as well as sources that you need to respond to or refute. Careful citation shows your readers what you know, where you stand, and what you think is important. And I would even add to this, it says, while you may not be a recognized expert, even if you are an expert on the topic, I don't think it hurts to add credible sources to anything that you're writing. Source citations show that you understand the need to give credit when you make use of someone else's intellectual property, especially in academic writing. When it's better to be safe than sorry, include a citation for any source you think you might need to cite. Source citations give explicit directions to guide readers who want to look for themselves at the works you're using. So first of all, as you are going to be researching your topic, you need to find a method that works well for taking notes on your research, because I had one student one time that she just had piles of papers and it was very scattered, and I told her she needed to cite a certain source in her essay, and she was overwhelmed because she just had stacks and stacks of paper and research that she had printed, and she couldn't remember exactly where she had got the information that she had cited in her essay. So you need to make sure, as you are researching, you need to note the author, the title of the work, the copyright year, the page numbers or paragraphs where you find information and direct quotes, the publisher and where, like the website or where did you find this. So here's an example of a source from a reference page. This is how I would do this in APA format. This is a reference. And so with this, the only thing I would add is if I have direct information or direct quotes, I would definitely add the page numbers of where I found that information. Because as you research, you get so much research coming in, so much information that you need to process, and it can be overwhelming to have to go back and try to figure out where you got your information. And I think that leads to plagiarism sometimes because we just can't remember where we got it, so we either don't use it or we don't give credit for where we got the information. So here are some examples of different note taking that you can do during your research. A well used method is just to do the outline method, where and it can be formal like this with your Roman numerals and letters and numbers, or it can be less formal, like you could just put um, an asterisk and then bullet points or whatever works for you. But the outline method is a great way to do your research. Another thing with the outline method is you could create an outline before you start researching of what you want to do with your essay. So I want to address point A, point B, point C. And so then I could list those points and then add my information, just copy and paste with the reference under each point. So I found this article that really discusses point A. This article has a lot of great information on point B. That kind of way. You need to find, I've found with my own research that I needed to find a better method because I would have to scroll through pages of notes and research trying to remember, oh, there was this one really good point that I wanted to make, and I have this reference, but I can't remember which one it was. So make life easier for you by doing the preliminary work, like setting up some sort of method, some sort of outline, some sort of way to keep track of all the information. Another method for note taking while you're researching is the 2-column notes. And this is actually what I've decided to use more. And you can do this pen and paper, or you can do this on your computer. You can set up a table with 2 columns. And so in column 1, you have your reference and you have the information from that reference that you think is pertinent to your essay that you're writing. And then in column 2, your thoughts, your questions, your realizations, your synthesis. How is this going to apply to my essay? This is where you make all of your notes on how you're going to fit this information into your essay, what it relates to, which point this backs up. So I have started using the 2-column notes, like I said, and I will try to post an example of my notes because I try to research and write every semester with my students, and so I will see if I can't post an example for you so you can see that. And then these are just some other methods of note taking that I came across that are great for during class or during your studies and things like that. That I wish I would have known some of these note taking methods when I was in college and high school because some of these are great methods. So you're welcome to go through these and look at them, especially this Cornell method. It's a great method for helping you to record information and then retain that information. And so you can look over that and see if there's something there that will work for you. What I really want to focus on today is the process of inquiry and also about evaluating your sources. So let's look at inquiry first of all. Writers consume more than they produce. Their meals include words, images, landscapes, memories, books, thoughts, emotions, and hours, among other things. I hope that as you go throughout this semester that you have your topic in your head and you watch for information because you'll hear things in class, you'll see things in the news, you'll start to see information that maybe didn't stand out to you before, but now that you have this topic on your mind, you're like, oh, that's that totally goes with my topic. Oh, that I can use in my essay. And you start to collect these things, you start to consume this information. Inquiry both precedes drafting and encompasses it. Inquiry should inform writing even through most of revision. You should be using research throughout the writing process. I know sometimes I will start with my research and then I will write my essay and then I will see, oh, I need a statistic to back this up, so I'll go back to researching. Writing can really guide your research. A Microsoft instructor, he recommends writing your essay and then doing the research because then you can see what research you really need to do. I think if you just encompass it all, just integrate research into all of the writing process, that it will really build a powerful essay. All right, we are going to look at this essay called Accessorizing the Scoops of Summer. And I want you to think, what do you know? What do you already know about a sundae, an ice cream sundae? I would assume most of us have tried an ice cream sundae. Um, and so, as you're thinking about what information you know about an ice cream sundae, would you be able to write a full essay on an ice cream sundae? Would it be interesting, the essay that you wrote? So, we're going to read this essay by Kay Rentschler, and she is a professional chef. And I want you to look at the research that she's done and the information that she pulls into this essay, and I want you to think about the effects that this information has. Okay, the French may have given refinement to ice cream with their coupes and parfaits, but it took American excess and ingenuity to create the sundae, as messy and irresistible as democracy itself. Irresistibility aside, for most adults, the sundae occupies a world where a fleeting tryst with several hundreds of calories is considered a bad idea. This is why ice cream sundaes, like summer loves, bloom best when the real world backs off, at a dinner party's end, when surfeit is indulged, not mid-afternoon with the children. Any proper sundae begins with a couple of scoops of deeply chilled ice cream dropped into a tall-footed dish. The ice cream is easy. With premium brands everywhere, why toil? It is the jarred sauces and commercial knickknacks that must go. These can be made much improved and availed of a certain sophistication at home. Classic ice cream flavors like chocolate, vanilla, and coffee, stately, resonant, or richly neutral, make the best foundations. Skip flavors that scream with high notes or stutter with chunks. They need to go off in a cone. In practical terms, the temperature of the ice cream is crucial. Optimally, the full surface of each scoop has a flowing liquid sheen, while the inside stays elastic enough to cleave to a spoon. Perfection, oh so ephemeral, is typically wrested from frigid ice cream with a hot scoop. But do not be afraid to pre-scoop. Arrange similar flavors on a plastic lined tray and freeze them in advance of serving. A firm start is essential because it is all history when freeze comes to thaw in warm flowing sauce. Ice cream sundaes, of course, find expression in their sauces, which provide layers of flavor and seismic contrast in temperature and tone. Typically, sundae sauces inhabit two spheres, the soft, rich, and unctuous, and the vivid and bright. One lulls the ice cream while the other jolts it a bit. The chief members of the lulling category are hot fudge, marshmallow, caramel, and butterscotch. Commercial versions are prepared with lavish amounts of corn syrup and an army of stabilizers to give them presence and flow, but we are not going there. A well-constructed homemade hot fudge sauce moves forward with dark, smoky accents and arrives with plenty of chew. High-fat cocoa and a couple of chunks of bittersweet chocolate cooked in sugar and cream make all that possible without a double boiler. Caramel and butterscotch sauce give fits of excess to ice cream. Caramel begins with granulated sugar seared to aromatic molten amber, while butterscotch takes its character from brown sugar. Both contain cream and, yes, butter, and both strikes round, rich, pleasingly burnished tones. Either will embrace a foundation ice cream flavor with abandon. Lush and glamorous, real marshmallow sauce does exist outside the jar and will make itself comfortable in any sundae setting, particularly as an opposites attract foil for dark chocolate ice cream. To the category of vivid and bright belong fruit sauces, particularly those with a touch of acidity and a shake of vibrant color. Strawberries, raspberries, blueberries, sour cherries, or pineapples, sweet, just ripe fruits cooked briefly with sugar, will brighten vanilla's pallor. High pectin fruits can often go it alone without cornstarch for body. Ice cream sundaes need proper sequencing too. Start with chilled glasses if the weather is steamy. Bottommost, a ribbon of the dominant sauce, then one large or two small scoops of ice cream and a blast of sauce. For a two-sauce sundae, the tonal transition or secondary sauce flows here. Elaborate in softness. A sundae wants interruption in the form of crunch. Sugar toasted nuts or crisp flake coconut, meringue buttons, macaroons, paper thin cookie bites, even crushed peppermints or skinny pretzels look festive, taste good, and get stuck in your teeth. Toss one or more of these embellishments into the fray, leaving more for the finish, and keep going. Build the sundae's crown with additional scoops followed by sauce. Reckon half a cup total sauce to a sundae, and remember, it is the size of the glass that dictates a sundae's dimensions, not your conscience. The collective excess would diminish, of course, without whipped cream, drifting like a cloud overhead. It is more, yes, but whipped cream actually lightens the interplay between elements in a sundae and ultimately defines its look. The effect, however, must be virginal, so toss the can, ditch the Cool Whip, and head for pure heavy cream. Put a dead chill on it and whip it lightly with a touch of sugar and a thimble of vanilla. It should nearly faint from languor. Arrange additional toppings, accessories, after all are everything, and rush forth from the kitchen, creation in hand. An ice cream sundae is summer Cinderella. Enjoy her, if possible, before midnight. And then she gives recipes for the things that she was talking about. So, as we read this article, what did you like or dislike about it? Was it well written? What did you learn about sundaes that you didn't know before? For example, I didn't know the difference between caramel and butterscotch. I know they're very similar, but I didn't know exactly what made them different. That was interesting for me to learn something new. What information was probably from research? What effect did the new information have on you as a reader? What was the purpose of this article? Did the author achieve that purpose? And above all, I want you to notice that knowing your stuff can really make great writing. Because this author knew her stuff about ice cream sundaes, it made it interesting. There were so many different things that I learned from reading this article, which kept me reading. I wanted to learn more because there were so many little interesting tidbits, and it flowed from one idea to the next very well. So now I want you to take 5 minutes right now and just write about your hometown, whatever comes to mind, what you know about your hometown. Describe your hometown to someone who's never been there before. After you've done that, I want you to take a highlighter and just highlight all of the facts that you've written down. What is the difference between fact and opinion? If I say that my town has a low crime rate and is a safe place to live, is that fact or opinion? That is my opinion. But if I back it up with statistics, if I say in the year 2018, only 25 crimes were committed, and of those, only 2 were violent crimes, then I could say, based on these statistics, my town is a safe place to live. Then it's a fact, okay? Now remember, facts can change. People once believed that it was a fact that the world was flat. Through exploration and discovery, this was disproved, and we now know that the world is round. In the healthcare field, there are many things that have been fact, but have been changing as we get more research and more information. And so you want to make sure that you use the most up-to-date facts and that you have a lot of sources that are backing up any claims that you're making. So with academic writing, you need fact-based writing, and so you don't want to just say this is bad, but you want to say this is bad because, and have research backing that up. The more you can demonstrate that you know what you're talking about and that your claims are based on strong research, the more effective your writing. And I really like this little poem. The more you read, the more you know. The more you know, the smarter you grow. The smarter you grow, the stronger your voice in speaking your mind or making a choice. In everything, I think in social media, if we use these principles a little bit more and had more research-based posting on social media, imagine how different the world would look. And remember, as you're researching, to research with an open mind. Don't just look at sources that support your stance. Keep an open mind and look at every angle. I've got this little picture here. If you've heard believe it's a Chinese proverb, of the blind men who came across an elephant, and one felt the elephant's trunk and said, "Oh, this is a snake," and another one felt his leg and said, "No, this is a tree." Like, depending on what angle we're coming from, we're going to see things differently. So make sure you look at different angles so that you can get the big picture. All right, so I also wanted to focus on evaluating your sources, making sure that the sources you're using are the best possible sources, because facts can also be manipulated and they can be used in different ways. And you want to make sure that the sources that you're using are credible and effective. All right, so first of all, when looking at a source, you need to determine whether it's a primary source or a secondary source. And there's nothing that says that primary sources are better than secondary sources. It depends on what you're writing and what your purpose is. So, a primary source provides firsthand knowledge. It is basic sources of raw information. So, some examples of primary sources might be films, works of art, literary works, eyewitness accounts, blog posts, video recordings of actual events, photographs, journals, diaries, historical documents such as letters and speeches, and research reports or essays are all considered primary sources. Secondary sources report on or analyze the research of others. They give descriptions or interpretations of primary sources. So, some examples of secondary sources would be reviews, news reports, biographies, encyclopedia articles, or a meta-analysis of research, a review of research, etc. So those are considered secondary sources. And like I said, there's no way of saying, "Oh, this is better because it's a primary source." It really depends on what you're doing. All right, so let's look at scholarly sources versus popular sources. And as we look at those, I want you to think which would be better for your academic writing. Scholarly sources, here are some aspects. Title often contains the word journal. It's available mainly through libraries and library databases. Few commercial advertisements. Authors identified with academic credentials. Summary or abstract appears on the first page. Articles are fairly long. Articles cite sources and provide bibliographies or references at the end. And let's look at popular sources. Popular sources, generally, journal does not appear in the title. Many advertisements. Authors are usually journalists or reporters that are hired by the publication. They are not academics or experts. No summary or abstract. Articles are fairly short. Articles may include quotations, but do not necessarily cite sources or provide bibliographies. So, for example, I have here, you know, some examples, like a scholarly, we've got Journal of Marriage and Family. This is a scholarly book. Popular, for example, Time Magazine is a popular source. So you want to, with academic writing, you want to lean more on scholarly sources. And even better are peer-reviewed sources. And peer-reviewed sources are exactly what they say. They're sources that have been reviewed by peers in the field. And so something you can do, for example, you will be using the Learn library, and you can limit your database search to peer-reviewed journals only. You want to look at articles and see if they've been reviewed by other peers, by other researchers. And this is good to see, is this just one person's opinion, one person's research, or is this backed up by other research? All right, so when evaluating your sources, there are some different guidelines for evaluating a source's usefulness and credibility. Your purpose is the first thing you want to look at. Will this source add to your writing? For example, I was researching colic and migraines, and I did a broad search of colic, and it brought up articles about colic in horses. While that might be a great source and it might be peer reviewed and academic, it does not relate to what I'm writing about. I want to look at sources on colic in babies. So I really want to look for relevance. How closely related is the source to the topic I am researching? And so, or if I find an article on a research study that was done in China, and it was just looking at a group of 20 women who had babies with colic, it may not be relevant because it's such a small and local, it's only, maybe it only applies in that area. And so I need to always be asking myself, like as I'm looking at abstracts, as I'm looking at even just the titles of the articles in a search, are they relevant? Is this really going to add to my writing? And if not, then just skip over it. Also look at the level of specialization and audience. Who was this source originally written for? How does this audience affect your audience? This is especially important for me if I am researching something and I come across an article that was written for medical experts. It might be above my level. It might not help me in my essay because I'm not going to understand a lot of it because I'm not a medical expert in that field. And so I might want to look for something that is maybe a lower level of specialization. Or if I am writing for that higher level of specialization, then I want to look for more articles like that. But I need to think about who my audience is and who the audience is for the articles that I'm using and make sure that they work together. Also, we want to look at timeliness. You want to look at the date of publication. Recent publications are generally more useful than outdated or older ones. When I go to my doctor, I don't want my doctor using practices from the 1900s, like the early 1900s. If he has a can full of leeches, I get nervous. I want my doctor to be using the most up to date research possible in his practice, and it's the same in our writing. We want to use the most recent publications as much as possible. Also, you want to look at the credentials of the publisher or sponsor and the author. What can you learn about the publisher or sponsor of that source? A source published by an Ivy League college will have more credibility than a self published source, for example. So, if just some average Joe Schmo does a blog post on the importance of eating vegetables, that's fine. But if I have a Harvard doctorate thesis written on the importance of vegetables, or a Harvard graduate writing about that, that's going to give a little bit more credibility. So you want to look at who wrote the article that you're looking at. What are his or her credentials? Does this author show up often in your research? If you keep seeing the same name pop up in your research, that probably means that they are an expert in that field, and you can rely on that information to be credible and useful. All right. Also, you want to look at bias and the stance of the source. What is the stance or point of view of the source? What is the purpose behind the writing? Is this facts or interpretation of facts? Is this completely one-sided or biased? Does the author use broad generalizations without anything to back it up? For example, there has been the controversy with immunizations, and there was the study that was published quite a few years now that showed a link between immunizations and autism. But in further reviewing this study, one, the results weren't able to be reproduced, and not and full information wasn't given in the study in order to reproduce the study. And then it was found that the scientists who did the study had been hired by an attorney group that's representing families that were suing immunization companies, drug companies. And so there was a bias there, and not all of the facts were objectively presented, and just one side of the facts were used in order to show this link. And so since then, study after study after study has debunked that connection and that information that was produced by that study. But that study has done a lot of harm because people keep using that study even though it has been proven to be biased and one-sided. So you want to make sure when you're using information that there isn't a bias and that you're looking at both sides and that there's objectivity with that. You want to look at the accuracy of the source. How accurate and complete is the information? How thorough are the works cited? Can you find other sources that corroborate what this source is saying? Is this source peer-reviewed? So if you find one article that supports your claim, but then there are 50 articles that refute your claim, you might have to rethink your claim. Also, cross-reference to the source. Is the source cited in other works? Does the source have citations, links to credible sources such as universities or research facilities? You really want to know your source if you're going to be using it. Especially online. You want to evaluate your online sources, websites, blogs, and anything you find on the internet, because basically anyone can put information on the internet. For example, Wikipedia. Instructors, teachers, professors discourage students from using Wikipedia because anyone can enter information. However, Wikipedia does have its benefits, because a lot of times experts in the different fields on Wikipedia will update and will correct information, and a lot of times incorrect information will get taken out of that Wikipedia article. But you want to be careful with that. Also, you are going into healthcare, and so you know that there are so many different sources. You know, if I have some symptoms, I can type in that information and I will get all these different sources that will tell me what's wrong with me. But you have to be careful with that. You have to be careful what your sources are and how you're using that information. For example, a little humorous story. A friend of mine, her little boy, he was probably 7 or 8 years old, woke up in the middle of the night and had a tummy ache. And he decided to not wake up his mom and dad, but that he would be proactive and he would figure out what was wrong with him. So he got on the computer and he Googled his symptoms, and he came to his mom and he woke her up and he was crying and he was upset, and he said, "Mom, I have some bad news. I'm pregnant." And I just laugh at this story because, you know, he probably found some good, valid sources, but he misinterpreted that information. Um, and so we really want to make sure that all the information that we're getting online, that we are checking our sources and we're using that information in the best way possible. So here's there's some great videos that I've got here about, this one is why you can't just do a Google search when doing academic research. And here is a great acronym to use to remember some things to look for when you're evaluating your online sources. KAPOW. So currency, how timely is the source? Is it written within the last 3 years? Authority, who created the source and what are his or her credentials? If you can't find who created something, it's probably not the best source to use. Purpose, what is the purpose of this source? To educate or to inform, or is it to entertain, to sell a product? For example, if I'm writing an essay on insulin and I find a source that has tons of advertisements, it's probably trying to sell me a product, and so I might want to look for more research based. Objectivity, is there a bias? Is only one side portrayed? And writing style, is the writing clear? Are there grammatical errors? If you're finding a lot of grammatical errors and typos, it's probably not a good resource. And so, like I said, we want to avoid just using Google search or basic internet searches for our research, but it can be a good starting point. Just be sure to use the criteria listed earlier for evaluating any source you decide to use. I like to do a basic Google search just as a jumping off point. I like to see kind of what is being said, and then dive deeper by using online databases such as the Learn Library, which is what you'll be using in this class. The internet can be a help and a hindrance. There is so much information available at your fingertips, but sometimes too much information can be a bad thing, and not everything on the internet is accurate. The following videos give some tips for using Google search more effectively, and also there is this great introduction video to the Learn Library. And I will also post some other videos on using research strategies and specifically using the Learn Library. Hopefully it will be your best friend. Good luck in your research, and we'll see you out there.